Welcome to Sun Life's Bright Views webinar series. Today's topic is this year's back to school conversation. I'm Patty Annable from Lumino Health and I'll be facilitating today's session. If you haven't heard of Lumino Health, it's Canada's largest network of health resources and it's an innovation from Sun Life. On the Lumino Health website, you can search and connect with local healthcare providers and find content and resources to help you manage your health. Lumino Health is a free resource to all Canadians. Let's take a look at today's agenda. First, we will have the panel discussion with our experts, followed by our Q&A session, and then we will share some tools and resources. It's back to school time for children and teens across the country, but this year will look much different because of the many measures in place to reduce the spread of COVID-19. Whether attending school in person or online, there are many household conversations happening with questions, worries, and perhaps anxieties. How can our parents address their children's concerns and help them have a positive mindset while managing all of these changes? To help us answer some of these questions, we've invited two mental health professionals to join this discussion. With us today, we have Dr. Yenev El-Harar, a psychologist at West Island Therapy Center in Montreal, and Reisa Loureiro, a Brazilian-trained child and adolescent psychiatrist and mental health clinician. She is currently licensing in Ontario with the College of Psychotherapists. She works at Roncesvalles Psychology Clinic in Toronto, where she's under the supervision of Dr. Lauren Batho, clinical psychologist. Welcome, and thank you both for joining us. Before we get started, it's important to note that the content in this webinar is not medical advice. If you have questions about your health or COVID-19, please contact your doctor. If you need immediate assistance, please call 911. It's also important to note that we are not educational professionals. The aim of this webinar is to help parents support their children as they head back to school. Please also note we're recording this session for future use. Okay, and with that, let's get started with a polling question to get a sense of our audience and who's joined us today and the situations they're facing as they head back to school. So if everyone could give us a sense of where you're at, what level of schooling is your student attending? If you have more than one child, select all that apply, and we'll give you a few seconds to give us your answers. All right, we could reveal the answers. We have 71% of our audience have elementary aged children, 20% are middle school, 31% are high school, and 8% are post-secondary. Perfect, thank you for answering. Let's do one more polling question. Obviously this time back to school scenarios are different, so we're trying to get a sense of what does back to school look like for your family. Again, if you have more than one child, please select all that apply, whether it's in-person, online, a mix of online and in-person. Whether you've decided to homeschool or you're unsure at this time. We'll give you a few seconds. Okay, let's see the results. Okay, 71% are sending children back in person, 15% have chosen online. We have 21% of our audience has a mix of online and in person. 0 have decided to homeschool, and 5% are still unsure. So this is great to set the stage for how we can position our answers to some of the questions. One last polling question for us to understand. What concerns have your children expressed about going back to school? Again, select all that apply. Are they worried about getting sick with COVID-19, bringing COVID home and getting other family members sick? Are they worried about how to stay safe at school or not seeing friends, having to wear a mask all day, not knowing what to expect or things being different overall? Or has your child not expressed concerns at all? We'll give you a few seconds too. Okay, we'll see the results. 14% of their children are saying they're sick, or they're worried about getting sick. 14% are worried about bringing it home. 4% about how to stay safe at school. 8% worried about not seeing friends. 16% having to wear a mask all day. 25% are worried about not knowing what to expect or things being different, and 20% are saying their children have not expressed concerns. Thank you very much for sharing that information. It helps us as we have our panel discussion today to get a sense of where you are at, and we can help shape our answers based off that. So let's get started. Dr. Elhar, what can parents do to ease their children or teens' anxiety or worries at this time?
Okay. Hi, Patty. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. Well, I think the most important thing is for parents to talk to their kids. As they're going back to school and they're experiencing all different range of emotions, I think the most important thing is for parents to listen and to talk to their kids about their concerns and to validate the way they're feeling. And at the same time, to take those concerns seriously. They're going to go through a range of different emotions, like I said, and to be able to kind of to talk to them, to go through their day, to go through how the day went is super important. And so at this point, one of the most important things to do is to have some real honest conversations with their children and to reassure them that a lot of people have worked really hard over the summer and their teachers have been there fairly early on, getting things in place, putting certain safety measures in place to ensure their safety. And again, to talk about all those safety measures that have been taken in order to ensure their safety.
Great, thank you for that. Some kids and teens may be reluctant to share their thoughts and fears, or others may not know how to express them. Raisa, I'm wondering if you can help us understand what are some ways parents can encourage conversations with their child or teen about their thoughts or worries on returning to school. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I think just like Dr. Elhar said, validating their emotions and validating their thoughts is very interesting. It really helps them to open up and feel confident on talking about those emotions. Having an open conversation and maybe even sharing some of your own experiences with that, being mindful not to add extra anxieties to the kids, because if they haven't shared that, you might be adding an extra concern or burden for them. Going through their expectations, maybe just by asking them their expectations on regards to school, and then addressing what is realistic or not, both if they're too optimistic or too pessimistic would be interesting. But also reminding the kids that there are some guidelines saying and a lot of things about going back to school, and talking to them about the guidelines regarding with age-appropriate language is also very interesting to help them talk about or getting to talk about their own thoughts or worries of going back to school.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Elhar, are there things parents need to be mindful of so not to further add to their children's worries, as Raisa has just mentioned? Is it safe to talk about back to school with other parents in front of our kids?
I definitely think it is. And I think we're human, right? So we want to share the way we're feeling with our kids, but to a certain extent. We have to be careful with that. The way what we project onto our kids is likely the way they're going to feel. So if we're super anxious about the kids going back and we're projecting that onto our children, they themselves may take those worries with them and they may internalize those worries. So while it's important to have honest conversations, there are risks involved in going back, there are fears. We are all nervous, or many of us are nervous about sending our kids back to school and having them be there. At the same time, we have to also be careful when we transmit this type of information to our children that we're not also transmitting our worries and our fears onto them. And that's really important. So it's a bit of a challenge for us now, because we want to have these open, honest conversations with our children, but we also have to be mindful at the same time that the way we're feeling, they're likely going to feel as well.
Right. Such great points.
Thank you.
Children going back to in-person classes will see a lot of changes, from masks to hygiene, physical distancing measures. Raisa, do you have any suggestions about how parents should approach discussing all of these changes with their children?
Yeah, sure. I find it would be interesting to separate it by age or at least chunks of age. So for teenagers, they are easily talkative and understand when you talk to them. So having an open conversation and asking non-leading questions, so open-ended questions. So what do you expect? And not things like, are you worried about the new changes? But asking what are you thinking about the changes, and not adding the content of the emotional content to the question, can be a way of helping them to talk about it. And also, and again, balance the expectations they might have. So some of them might be over optimistic about seeing their friends, and that they're young and they will never get sick and things like that. Or they can be extremely worried about getting sick and giving any disease to their parents. So just balancing those expectations out would be interesting. When you have a younger kid, they also benefit from communication, like a conversation, but they also benefit from play and games. So having some visual cues, a game cards, or playing with a doll or something like that, that they can know what to expect in advance. So they will be wearing masks, but what if your mask gets soiled? What if your friend did not get to wear properly the mask? And then having the strategies beforehand so that they can train them and at least think about it before going back to school, right? And with younger kids, talking is really hard. They just have an amount of information they can keep for a while. So maybe a storytelling or a play where the characters feel something, or the characters go through something that they will face when they go back to school. And then you can name the characters' emotions, you can name the characters' struggles, so that they can relate to the characters, and they will probably leave that when they go back to school, and then they will know also how to cope with those situations.
Perfect, thank you. Storytelling is a great idea. I'll definitely be using that with my kids to kind of role play some of those different scenarios. Thank you for that. I want to shift focus for a minute from our children to learn about how our audience as parents and caregivers are feeling about our kids going back to school. So let's take a minute and answer the next polling question. How are you feeling about your children returning to school? I can't wait. They really need the structure and stimulation. Or I'm feeling nervous but ready. It's the best thing for them. Or very anxious. I feel like it's too soon. We'll give you a few seconds. Okay, let's see the results. 13% are saying they can't wait. Their children really need the structure and stimulation. 66%, majority, are feeling nervous but ready, thinking it's the best thing for them. And 21% are feeling anxious and feel it's too soon. Dr. El-Harar, what are some tips you have for parents to help manage their own worries and anxieties for their children returning to school?
It's a very good question. I think it's important to recognize, firstly, that those worries are to be expected in many ways. So to kind of give yourself somewhat of a free pass these days, that, you know, if you're worried, if you're anxious, you know, it's to be expected. These are really challenging times and really unprecedented times. So what we're going through. So, on the other hand, I would also encourage talking. And again, I spoke about talking before to our kids, but we as adults also need to talk about the way we're feeling. You know, whether we're talking to our family members, or whether we're talking to our colleagues at work or to our friends, it's really important to share the way we're feeling with others and to connect with others. We may have different opinions than other people, than our friends, but nevertheless, sharing and validating the way we're feeling or the way our friends are feeling is super important at this point. I also feel like we need to take care of ourselves, so that to give ourselves that self-love and the self-compassion at this point is important. To do things that are helpful to us in order to manage our own stresses and our own anxieties, developing some type of stress management plan where we can say, okay, this is how I'm going to manage my day. I'm going to put some techniques in there that's going to allow me to, when I'm feeling anxious, I know I can go and do this, be it, a walk in the park or meditation or a phone call or just having coffee with a friend of mine, just so I can unload a little bit. It's important at this point in time to take care of yourself as well. We know, of course, that if we can include a little bit of exercise in our day, if we can ensure that we're sleeping well, just really taking care of ourselves during these very anxiety-provoking times is really important. Right? We know that if we're okay, our children are going to be that much better off as well. So sometimes, we devote so much time and attention, as we should, to our children, and sometimes, unfortunately, at our own detriment. And it's super important as well to take care of ourselves during these times.
Yeah, great reminder. I mean, it's so easy to overlook some of those basics as we juggle everything right now. So thank you. It's a great reminder.
Exactly.
Raisa, how can parents help their children cope with COVID fatigue at school? Are mental health days okay for kids? And what are some other things that parents can do to support their kids?
Kids, well, everyone actually copes better with anxiety, and the more we have consistency, right? A lot of the burden of COVID is because everything is so uncertain and we don't know how things are going to be in a few months from now. But for kids, it's just the same. They just can't think that much of ahead. So having consistency and being calm while you're talking to your kids, validating them, their anxieties, their worries, if they feel tired for going back to school, because they would anyways just by the end of the summer vacations, but now it's an extra burden because they spend 6 months in their house with their families, right? So be consistent with them, validate those feelings of tiredness and not wanting to go to school, but be mindful of how important it is for them to continue going to school, that it will get better if they continue to engage with it, right? Having a weekly schedule will be an easier way for them to have an idea of how their week are planned out. And so you can have separate time for homework, school time, play time, and that's very important to have a spare chunk of time for recreation for them and for the family. Just like Dr. Elhar just said, it's important for everyone to be interacting socially, and you can interact with your kids with a game or doing something together, like even if just it's a yoga or a practice with the whole family would be nice. In regards to mental health days, they can benefit, but just keep in mind that it's also a break in their routine. So if your kid's needing too much of mental health days or too much days off school, maybe it would be interesting to see a specialist, a pediatrician, your family doctor, or even a psychologist for that. Could be very interesting for your kid if the kid is struggling. And also be involved with the changes they're going through at school. That will not only give them a lot of support with what they're going through, it will always keep you updated with what's going on. The changes that are being implemented have not been trialed before, so some will be very helpful, but other might not be so helpful. So help your kid to advocate for those that are helpful, can also bring that sense of togetherness for them and that support they need.
Thank you. I know personally for my kids, that importance of routine is so great for them. So it's a great reminder. Thank you.
Patty, can I interject for a sec?
Sure.
I very much agree with what Raisa just said. I think the conversation this year will move a little bit away from the importance of academics, and although of course by all means they are important, I also think the mental health aspect this year will be that much more important. So when we talk about COVID fatigue, I think we also have to be mindful of the fact that our kids are going through a very long day in school. Many of them have to wear masks, social distance. These are challenges that kids never have had before, nor teachers. So I think we really want to look at the mental health aspect this year, that we want to give our kids somewhat of a break and really focus on health and what's in their best interest when they come home from school, giving them a little bit of downtime on the weekends, really to promote physical activity, promote activities that are going to support good mental health initiatives as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent points. And it's a good segue to my next question, actually, for you, Dr. Elhar. It's important to have those tools in our toolbox when it comes to mental wellness. Do you have any suggested resources patients or parents for their kids can access to help give their kids and teens those tools to empower them too when it comes to their own mental health and emphasize the importance of talking and sharing?
In terms of websites and tools, there's definitely quite a few out there now, and more so in the last 6 months. The Mental Health Commission of Canada put out a wonderful website with tons of resources and links to help children and their parents. There are some amazing external resources available, including Youth and Mental Health Canada, Kids Help Phone, and jack.org. I also find, in talking with a lot of my own clients, their actual schools have done a wonderful job on their own websites of putting up some resources available to them. They're really tapping into their own bank of expertise within their own schools. The teachers and the specialists that are working in the schools are putting together, similar to what we're doing today. They're doing their own virtual programming where they're setting up even some Facebook Live events. And I think if you can connect on that level and get as much support and information as possible, we're going to be able to weather this through.
Thank you. Yeah, great points. I know I've already received a lot of information and resources from my own school, so it's a great point, but great to highlight jack.org and Youth Mental Health Canada, Kids Help Phone. There's so many resources and available to parents today, so thank you. I want to do one more polling question to see what our audience thinks about, what do you think your children miss most about school? They've been home since March. What do you think they're missing most about school? So we'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Okay, let's see the results. Okay, 80% miss seeing their friends. True for my kids as well. They're very excited to get back and see their friends again. 13% miss the in-person learning, 4% extracurricular activities, and 3% physical activity. So thank you for answering that. This question is a great transition into our next set of questions, which focuses on online learning. Some parents will opt for online learning for their child or children, or their child might be attending a mix of online and in-person, as we saw earlier poll results. Raisa, I'm wondering if you can offer some tips to help parents keep their kids and teens motivated to learn while they're at home.
I find that it's important to keep a balance. The screen is a lot more tiring than being seated on a desk with your teachers. There's also the lack of social interaction when you're online learning, and that can take the burden off paying attention to all this content for a longer period of time that will happen on online learning. So if your kid is getting tired, please be attentive to it. Respect their limits for that. So try to keep a balance between the online on-screen learning and self-learning activities, and also trying to support them with that in case they feel the need to advocate for themselves with their teachers for that. Help them access their teachers, because they can be very unmotivated with increasingly complex concepts. So it's going to be hard for them to understand more things the more they get on throughout the school year. And it's important to keep in mind that children are naturally curious. They enjoy learning new things. So if your kid is having is giving you issue to learn new things, it's probably something going on there. So you probably boredom is underneath something. So what can keep them out of that area of boredom is that when they get to see the practical aspect of what they're learning. So you get to talk about math when you're doing groceries. You can talk about the shapes of the fruits or the colors, or doing even simple math with change or adding up. Or if you need a little bit more complex, you can do the taxes count on how much the grocery is going to be. Or you can talk about the weather and how that can be translated to science classes. So you can talk about anything in regards to weather or even the light and how it changes the leaves color during the fall. So all that can be translated to real life experiences, and that will keep them motivated in a way to understand of the practical aspect of what they're learning at school as well, and maybe take a burden off not being socially interacting with other friends, right?
Yeah, those are great suggestions. I love the bringing in the daily activity as the practical examples of what they're learning. That's great. Dr. Elhar, for those children who will be learning at home, what are some ways parents can help ensure they're feeling connected to their peers?
And I think it was a good segue because from what Raisa was saying, those kids who aren't connected, and it's going to be a challenge this year for sure to keep those social connections going. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges for parents. And if we could promote, creation of these kind of pods that we're calling them, these small groups where kids can interact safely with other kids, doing different activities outside of their home or even within their home. Again, these are small groups that we want to encourage, where those kids who aren't necessarily going to school, the kids who are learning online, but need that social interaction. It's one thing to establish it online, and again, that's important. So to ensure that they are communicating, and as we know, kids do a really great job communicating online with each other, but they need that face-to-face. So if we could help them create those opportunities to have some face-to-face interaction, it could be by playing sports, it could be by doing artwork, it could be by engaging in some social activity. It really doesn't matter, but we really need to do a good job this year of encouraging and making sure that our kids are interacting socially amongst each other. And again, we can enroll them in different extracurricular activities. It really doesn't matter what we do, as long as first of all, they want to do it. And secondly, again, it involves other children with them.
Right. And I'm assuming you would say consistency would be key there as well, right? And making sure that it's on a regular basis, not the one-off.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to, if we can develop some type of plan. The kids, when they go to school from Monday to Friday, they have a plan in place. They know, or rather a schedule. And if we can develop a schedule for our kids as well, as best that we can, we don't have to, a test for every hour of their day. But if we could develop some type of schedule for them, where, like you mentioned, we know on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, they're going to go to an activity, and that would be amazing for them. It's also going to give them something to look forward to, because there's going to be some type of drain or a lag that comes with learning online. We saw that in the last 6 months. So if we could break up some of that monotony that may come and give them that outlet for them to interact with their friends, something to look forward to, they're going to love that. So absolutely, let's go ahead and do that.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to touch on some questions for our audience members with older children, those who've already graduated from high school, looking at starting or going back to college or a university setting. Raisa, I'm wondering how can parents help their students heading to post-secondary school deal with the sadness, or, as people say, FOMO, fear of missing out, related to all of those things that they've missed this year, right? So they've missed perhaps high school graduation, or there won't be Frosh Week this year, or those type of activities that generally start at the beginning of the year and help them connect with people. Are there any tips that parents can help their students with heading into that situation?
Well, first, I find that from what we said already in regards to parents, how they feel, and I'd like to validate for these parents that it is very uncomfortable to see our kids struggling. And it is very, very, especially if they're having like uncomfortable feelings like sadness or even anger or frustration, but they are very natural feelings. And it's important to validate those and to address those in a way. So everyone is feeling that way. That kind of brings us together in a way, because everybody's missing something, or most of us are missing something with the whole situation. It's a very challenging time for everyone in a specific way for each one, but still for everyone, keeping us together. And having that in mind, I find that we can find also some silver linings on this togetherness. Remembering I've heard a lot of good experiences in terms of like, I've never had spent so many times with my parents as I would if during the summertime, if I could just go out with my friends. So it was really good. I had reconnected with my sister, or I reconnected with my parents. So I've heard a lot of good information and good situations where those things happen. So not trying to diminish it at all, the situation that happened of missing everything they were expecting to, but maybe trying to focus or change the focus to things that they actually gained, or they noticed that they gained more because of the new situation as well. It can be a good way to address those things.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point about silver linings. I hope we've all experienced some wonderful, moments despite everything that we've had going on. So taking time to reflect and enjoy is a great suggestion. Many kids are heading off to post-secondary school. They're moving into new accommodations. This means shared living spaces and managing relationships with roommates. Dr. El-Harar, can you share some tips for parents to help empower their student with making smart choices in this new environment?
That's a good that's a good question. Listen, I think as your question suggests, I think it's important. It's very important at this point to empower our kids to make these smart choices in their new environment. They're going off, a lot of them are going off to school. These are definitely a new environment for them, with some really important decisions that they have to make that bear some potentially large ramifications and consequences with regard to their decisions. So I think it's really important right now to have these responsible conversations with their kids, to talk to them about responsible decision making, to talk about the implications of their actions. Whether it's COVID or not, we would still be having these conversations with our kids, truthfully. But now it takes on even more of a significance because of the reality that is. And again, it's important. We know teenagers and we know young adults, and they'll do certain things, and some of them have certain the sense of infallibility that things are going to be okay, and God love them for that, right? It's amazing that they have this way of thinking about the world, but with that, sometimes unfortunately comes some consequences to their with regard to their decisions that they make. So it's important for us as parents to have these very honest conversations about the risks that are associated with certain behaviors, the importance of taking certain precautions, knowing what we know right now with social distancing and the need to wear masks, and to advise our friends when we feel what they're doing is not appropriate, or to feel empowered to say, no, I don't feel comfortable doing something that I know is just not right. So it's important that we have these honest conversations with our children at this point, to empower them as they journey into this new area of their lives, which is exciting, but also comes with certain risks.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on it, but respecting other people's boundaries is so important. Everyone's at a different level of their comfort levels, right? So do you have any tips for parents as they approach these conversations with their children on respecting others' boundaries?
Well, I think it's in line with what we were talking about before. I think, again, to understand that there are differences, and we have to respect that one family may do something in one way and another family may subscribe to a totally different way, but at the same time we respect it, we understand the way that they feel, but at the same time we have to also feel confident that the way we want to do things is okay as well, because that's what we feel comfortable with. And to feel confident that the decisions that we're making, both as individuals or as parents for our children, is the right thing to do. And not to feel ashamed by it or to feel uncomfortable because we've made certain decisions that we feel is best for us and for our family. So again, it goes back to, like you were saying, Patty, about respecting certain boundaries and understanding that there's differences of opinions, and we get that and we understand that, but we also have to feel confident in the decisions that we're making that are best for ourselves and for our children as we move forward and we try to navigate through really some uncertain times. But again, to hold true to what we feel is the right thing to do at this point in time is really important.
Thank you. Okay, I have one final question before we move into our audience submitted questions. This is broader and applies to all age groups going back to school. What are some things parents can do to help their kids have and keep a positive mindset around school this year, regardless of their situation? I'd love to hear from both of you on this question. So Raisa, if we could start with you, that'd be great, and then we'll move to Dr. El-Harar. I think you're on mute, Raisa.
I'm sorry. In regards to what Dr. Elhar just said, I find that setting the boundaries and respecting your own boundaries and being faithful to that is very important. And it's important parents can empower their kids and empower themselves to do that. That's very helpful to go through to weather the storm out. It's very important for everyone. I also find, and I cannot stress enough about the sense of togetherness, and because it is uncertain times, many of the things that are being set now will probably lead guidelines in the future. So that can give a kind of a positive mindset in terms of, if you change your school curriculum and you are proactive with that, maybe it will help the kids next year to have a better curriculum, not only adapted to the mental health situation, but also in regards to their actual school and school activities. So you can be very, you're giving it to the world in a way. So you can be as a model to other schools, to other countries and everywhere else, with the new suggestions you make or the new implementations you can make at your school. I find that very interesting in terms of how powerful the situation is in regards to, I know it's a challenging time. Many things are changing, but especially because many things are changing, it is also an opportunity to make changes that were needed to be done a few years back already. And that's a good point to all these changes that we're making at school.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Elhar?
I have a couple of things. I think we have to understand that we're all in this together, that there's a commonality going on. And that's something that I think it's incredible that we will always have this. And I know that may sound weird right now, but we are all in this together, and we will get through this together. And I think that's a super important lesson to teach our children as well. I also feel like we have to give each other somewhat of a free pass. There are going to be days where we're going to come home from school and it's just not going to be a great day. And we're going to come home from work and it was terrible. And, okay, so we had a bad day. And then we're going to go to sleep and we're going to wake up the next morning and hopefully life is going to be better. That we have to give ourselves a bit of a free pass. The other thing which I hope we also understand through all of this is that this is an opportunity for us to teach compassion and empathy to our children. That there will be those around us who are going to be struggling, that things are going to be hard. And this is such an incredible opportunity for us to teach compassion for others in our children, to teach them to be empathetic towards others, to look out for others, to see the child who's struggling in class, or to see the teacher who's going through a hard day and to be there for them. I think this is an opportunity that we've never had to teach our children empathy and compassion. And the other thing which I also think is going to be able to teach is resiliency. This will be one incredible resilient generation of children having gone through this. And we will get through this. It's just going to take some time, but we will get through this. And coming out of this, we will have children who will have adapted, who will have gone through changes that, again, will have taught them to be extremely, extremely resilient. And that's an incredible attribute for later in life.
I love that. It's so true. Okay, so I want to move to the audience questions. Participants had the opportunity to submit questions to the panel when they registered for the webinar. So thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can, knowing the time that we have left. Maybe Dr. Elhar, I'll start with you and I'll move to Reza for the other questions. We'll kind of go back and forth if that's all right for format. So the first question I have is, if my child won't talk about their feelings or concerns about going back to school, are there visual cues I should be looking for me to understand how my child might be feeling?
So yes, there are. I think what's really important is to look for changes in behavior, to look at whether their child is behaving differently. And that person is absolutely right. Sometimes children are not going to tell us how they're feeling verbally, but they usually tell us through their nonverbals. So for example, if they're not eating, they're coming home and they're not eating, they're not sleeping well, they're having nightmares at nighttime, they're waking up a lot in the evening, they're very testy, maybe they're behaving in a way that you're not used to them behaving that way. Maybe they're curt in the way they're talking, they're using maybe bad language, maybe they're crying a lot, they're very teary-eyed. So we're looking for changes in behaviors for sure. So the nonverbal actually sometimes is more telling than the verbal in a lot of children, be it young children or even teenagers. We want to look for changes in behavior, very important. We also might want to reach out eventually to their teachers in school and ask them how they're doing. But let's look at how our kids are behaving, and it usually gives us a pretty good sign on how they're feeling.
Great, thank you. And Raisa, the next.
Sorry, can I just add one thing?
Absolutely, for sure.
I also, just one thing, I totally agree with Dr. Alhar on that, but I would just like to add that some kids do complain a lot about pain that doesn't make much sense. So a lot of headaches, stomach aches, or just unrelated to any physical concern pain can be also a good strategy, especially for young kids, for parents to be looking at in case they're showing too much of that. Could be an indication that they're struggling with something.
It's a great point. Thank you. So, Raisa, while I have you, how do you balance ensuring my kids? How do I balance ensuring my kids are practicing COVID safety, such as wearing a mask and social distancing, without causing them excessive anxiety and fear? I think this is a great question.
This is a great question, actually. I find that it is very well. Kids learn a lot through play, so make it a play. Make it playful. You can make a game where they are a ninja or a princess hiding their identities, or you can address it by drawing a self-portrait of the whole family and then taping a mask on top of them and seeing like who's underneath the mask or something like that. By addressing that and normalizing it through play can be a way to address using masks or doing hand hygiene while still not making it a burden for the kids. It's important to practice with them. So go out with them on an outing, talk to them through, and then go out and see how they go out in the world wearing their masks and doing hygiene properly. And you'll probably notice that the kid actually retain a lot of the information you gave them through play. So play, make it fun, and practice afterwards.
Great, thank you. We got a few questions from parents with very young children that are just starting JK or SK, junior or senior kindergarten. What are some practices we can use so our children won't associate school and learning with the anxiety and uncertainty of our current school environment? Dr. Elharar, can I ask you to take that one?
Sure. I think it's important that we talk about school in a very positive way. We look for the amazing things that went on during the day. We try to normalize it. It's during times that are not very normal, but we're going to try to normalize the experience for kids. And again, kids are incredible, right? So we're going to talk about their day, and they're going to talk about 1,000,001 things. Maybe, likely, the least of which is the fact that they're wearing a mask and they're sitting in pods or they're social distancing. So the reality is, I think they're going to be talking about all the great things that they're doing anyways during the day. Let's keep that conversation going. Of course, they're still going to have homework and everything else, so we're going to get right back to that stuff as well, which in our case is actually a very good thing. We're going to want to talk about their homework. We're just going to want to make it as normal as possible.
Great points. They'll be so excited to have more friends and something new for them, right?
That's very true. Sorry, Pat, just to continue, because here in Montreal, actually, the schools have started already. So it's been my experience that, and here I am, I'm asking them all kinds of questions, even the young kids about, so you had to wear a mask and you had to do this, you had to do that. And they're like, yeah, I had to do it, but okay. Like, let me tell you about recess and about the great teacher I have. And so it's really, the conversation kind of goes back to what it should anyways.
That's great. So we have time for one last question. Raisa, I'll ask you to take this before we end. How can we help manage our children's concerns if they're worried about getting their friends or loved ones sick? think you're on mute.
But yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Sorry. So I find that that's the question that's $1 million question, actually. Everybody is really worried about the going back to school, especially because of that, right? Among other things, and how is the pandemic gonna behave afterwards. So I find it's only fair to them to validate that worry, because everybody is concerned about that. That's a real concern, right? Mm-hmm. But there are many guidelines suggesting that kids spread less COVID than adults. And based on that the school boards are returning school right now. And there's a lot of people actually putting strategies in place to keep everyone safe. So I find that although it is a real concern, there are a lot of things that are being done by both individually and institutionally for that not to happen. And that you're keeping track and being compliant to those guidelines, recommendations, then you are also keeping yourself and your loved ones safe, as long as everyone is respecting those guidelines, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. We're all together doing each one our own part on this.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. You'll find more resources related to mental health and COVID-19 on Lumino Health, including our stress and anxiety guide, our virtual care guide, and COVID-19 resources and articles. You can also visit sunlife.ca for more health and wellness articles as well. So I want to say thank you again to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you to our audience. Take care, everyone.